He was a magician with the ball, a player who could make defenders vanish with a single touch. Yet, when history tells the story of France's 1998 World Cup triumph, his name barely echoes. Youri Djorkaeff was the silent architect of Les Bleus' golden summer, a man whose genius was overshadowed by the blinding light of Zinedine Zidane. For years, fans celebrated the grace of Zidane, the power of Thuram, and the heroics of Barthez, while Djorkaeff slipped quietly into the shadows of football memory. But behind the elegance, there was pain, the story of a man who never truly received the recognition his artistry deserved. He was born to be different, a child of immigrants with a flair that seemed too exotic for French football's rigid structure. He rose through the ranks not just as a player, but as a symbol of diversity in a changing France. And yet, at the very peak of his powers, at the very moment when he should have been immortalized, history looked the other way. This is not just a story of a World Cup winner. This is the story of the forgotten prince of 1998, a man who carried the weight of expectations, delivered on the biggest stage, and still left the field with the quiet sadness of knowing he would always be second best in the eyes of the world. Youri Djorkaeff was born on the 9th of March, 1968 in Lyon, France, into a family where football was not just a sport, but a way of life. His father, Youri Djorkaeff, had been a French international, and his Armenian Kalmyk heritage gave Youri a sense of identity that set him apart in a country still grappling with its multicultural reality. From an early age, Djorkaeff displayed an elegance with the ball that felt almost foreign in the context of French football of the 1980s, which prized strength and discipline over artistry. By the time he reached the professional stage, France was in transition. The glory of Michel Platini's 1984 generation had faded, and the country's football identity was searching for a new spark. Djorkaeff emerged at clubs like Strasbourg and Monaco, carving a reputation as a technical wizard capable of scoring spectacular goals, volleys, chips, and curling free kicks that defied logic. Yet, he was not a flashy extrovert. He was quiet, almost introverted, a man who let his feet speak for him. The early 1992 saw French football rebuilding from the humiliation of failing to qualify for the 1990 and 1994 World Cups. Djorkaeff became part of a new wave alongside names like Didier Deschamps, Laurent Blanc, and a young Zinedine Zidane. While Zidane was seen as the heir to Platini, Djorkaeff became the perfect complement. Subtle where Zidane was commanding, unpredictable where Zidane was precise. His move to Paris Saint-Germain in 1995 put him in the spotlight as PSG became a force in Europe, winning the UEFA Cup Winners' Cup in 1996. Then came Inter Milan, where he shared the stage with Ronaldo, the Brazilian phenomenon. It was there that Djorkaeff honed his craft, delivering spectacular goals, including an unforgettable scissor kick volley against AS Roma that made him one of Serie A's most respected attackers. But despite his brilliance, Djorkaeff was never fully embraced as a superstar. The French media often portrayed him as inconsistent, even enigmatic. He was loved by teammates, but rarely the center of attention. The shadow of Zidane loomed larger every year, and as the 1998 World Cup approached, it was clear who would be the face of France's golden generation. Still, Djorkaeff's role in that squad was indispensable. He linked midfield to attack, scored crucial goals in qualifiers, and carried a quiet responsibility that few recognized. He was the bridge between Zidane's artistry and the team's collective pragmatism. Yet, history is cruel. While Zidane's 2 headers in the World Cup final immortalized him, Djorkaeff, who started every knockout game and orchestrated attacks with supreme intelligence, became just another name in the background of France's greatest triumph. It was the beginning of a pattern. No matter what Djorkaeff achieved, recognition always seemed to escape him. Djorkaeff's rise through the footballing world was as poetic as his style of play. At Strasbourg and Monaco, he blossomed into one of France's most elegant attackers. At PSG, he became a star, dazzling fans with technical brilliance and a penchant for scoring goals that seemed to defy physics. The 1995-96 season was his masterpiece in Paris. 20 goals across all competitions, helping PSG win European silverware and establishing himself as one of the best forwards in Europe. A move to Inter Milan in 1996 elevated his profile even further. Serie A at the time was the world's toughest league, a place where defensive masters could smother even the brightest stars. Yet Djorkaeff thrived. His overhead volley against Roma remains one of the most iconic goals in Inter's history. He formed a devastating partnership with Ronaldo, the Brazilian phenomenon, and became a fan favorite at San Siro. But with every peak came shadows. Even at his best, Djorkaeff never enjoyed the unshakable trust of the French press. He was seen as mercurial, capable of brilliance one day and anonymous the next. The criticism intensified as Zidane rose to global superstardom. While Zidane was hailed as France's savior, Djorkaeff was often portrayed as the other one, the supporting act rather than the main show. The 1998 World Cup was meant to change that. Djorkaeff was a key part of France's attack, scoring in crucial qualifiers and playing every game in the knockout stages. He was the team's creative link, a steady presence in high-pressure moments. Yet when Zidane scored twice in the final, the narrative became clear. This was Zidane's team, Zidane's tournament, Zidane's destiny. After 1998, Djorkaeff's career entered a slow decline. He left Inter Milan for Kaiserslautern, then Bolton Wanderers, and later moved to Major League Soccer with the New York Red Bulls. He still produced moments of magic, but his star was fading. By the early 2002, he was no longer in the France squad, as a new generation led by Thierry Henry and David Trezeguet took over. The fall wasn't dramatic like that of a scandal-ridden star. It was quieter, almost tragic in its inevitability. Desta his contributions to France's golden era, Djorkaeff's name slowly slipped from conversations about the game's greats. He retired in 2006, largely forgotten by a football world obsessed with bigger names, brighter lights, and louder personalities. Behind the quiet grace that Djorkaeff displayed on the field, there was a lingering sense of injustice, a man who had given everything to the game but never truly felt celebrated. Those close to him have often spoken of his reserved nature, his discomfort with the media circus that surrounded modern football. While Zidane thrived as the poster boy of French football, Djorkaeff seemed almost relieved to avoid the spotlight, even if that meant being overlooked. He once admitted in an interview that fame was never his ambition. What he wanted was respect for his craft. Yet, the cruel reality of football is that memory rarely rewards the subtle. History celebrates the spectacular, and Djorkaeff's elegance, though breathtaking, was quiet enough to be forgotten. There were whispers that Djorkaeff felt isolated within the French squad, not in terms of relationships but in recognition. He was the connector, the glue between midfield and attack, yet every story of that team revolved around Zidane, Deschamps, Thuram, or Henry. The media rarely credited Djorkaeff for his indispensable role. After retirement, Djorkaeff drifted from the limelight. Unlike many of his contemporaries, he didn't pursue high-profile coaching or punditry jobs. He preferred to dedicate himself to charitable causes and, later, to work with FIFA's foundation to support humanitarian projects. It was noble work, yet it cemented his place outside the public eye. His quiet withdrawal spoke volumes. For all his achievements, a World Cup, a European Championship, trophies in France, Italy, and Europe, Djorkaeff was never given the aura of a legend. Fans of Inter Milan and PSG still remember him fondly, but for the wider world, his name is an afterthought. This is the darker truth of football fame. Talent alone is never enough. Without narrative, without the right story, even a magician like Djorkaeff can fade into the background of history. He became the forgotten prince, not because he failed, but because he succeeded in an era that demanded larger-than-life heroes. Looking back, it feels deeply unfair. Youri Djorkaeff was not just a passenger on France's road to glory, he was a vital architect of it. He scored crucial goals, created opportunities, and carried himself with a dignity that made him admired by teammates and opponents alike. Yet, history decided to cast him in a supporting role, as if his elegance was somehow less deserving of celebration than Zidane's charisma. But perhaps that is the tragedy of football fame. Legends are not just made by talent, they are made by stories. Zidane had the narrative, a son of Algerian immigrants who became the hero of a nation, scoring twice in the World Cup final. Djorkaeff's story, while equally compelling, lacked that climactic moment that captures the world's imagination. As a channel, we cannot help but ask, was Djorkaeff a wasted genius or simply a victim of football's brutal hierarchy of fame? Did we, as fans, fail to appreciate the subtle beauty of his game because it did not fit the blockbuster narrative we crave? When you watch his highlights today, the effortless dribbles, the perfectly timed passes, the outrageous volleys, you wonder how history let this man slip away from its pages. He was, in many ways, football's great paradox, a player too talented to ignore, yet too understated to be immortalized. Football tends to reward the loud, the dramatic, the spectacular. But Djorkaeff was a reminder that true artistry does not always shout. Sometimes it whispers. And perhaps that is why he was forgotten, because whispers rarely echo as far as roars. Today, Youri Djorkaeff lives far from the limelight, dedicating himself to humanitarian work and football development through the FIFA Foundation. He has found peace away from the stage that never fully celebrated him. For those who watched him in his prime, there is a quiet pride in remembering a player who embodied the artistry of the game without ever chasing glory. Time has a way of reshaping memory. As fans revisit footage of France's 1,998 campaign, more and more realize that Djorkaeff was not just a name on the team sheet. He was a conductor in France's orchestra, a bridge between generations, and a symbol of football played with elegance and intelligence. His legacy is not in statues or headlines, but in moments, the scissor kick goals, the delicate touches, the unselfish passes that led to glory. He remains a reminder that not every hero needs to be loud to be great. Perhaps history was unkind to him. Perhaps he deserved more recognition. But for those who truly love football, Djorkaeff's story is a bittersweet lesson. That genius does not always receive the applause it deserves, yet it leaves an imprint on the game that time can never erase. He has gone from the field, but for those who remember, he is eternal, the Shadow Prince of 1,998, the magician history tried to forget but never truly could.